Hi there, welcome to Urbinary, the podcast cataloging the everyday and extraordinary in the city.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Urbinary. I'm Shidsa and today I'm here with Giulia Li Destri. Giulia is a planning postdoc at the Department of Civil Engineering and Architecture, University of Catania. Her current research focuses on community learning, community organizing, and the relationship between civil society and institution in the field of spatial planning. She holds a PhD in architectural engineering and urban planning at La Sapienza University of Rome, complemented by a master's degree in philosophy earned at the University of Turin. Giulia discusses the influence of various theories on planning and the resulting shift towards holistic transdisciplinary approaches and engaged research practices. She also outlines how the COPED Summer School, COPEC, addresses these challenges and opportunities, focusing on university civil society partnership, organizational aspects of local entities, and the learning experiences of students and trainees. Welcome aboard, Giulia.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be here with you today.
Urbinary.
Your discussion fits well into the broader discourse of this conference, where you argued for an increasing gap between knowledge and action. Why do you believe that in recent decades, various theories have contributed to a loss of linearity in the relationship between knowledge and action?
Well, the beginning of the 20th century was characterized by the so-called crisis of the linear relation between knowledge and action, a crisis emphasized by theories such as complexity theory, chaos theory, etc. This crisis had particularly relevant consequences on the way science, and especially applied sciences like planning, have looked at their ability to transform the world. Trying to make it simple, three issues arose very clearly. First, our projects, our predictions, our ideas, our expectations always clash with reality, and they must undergo an inevitable alteration when implemented. Second, our actions produce effects that are unpredictable and that very often we cannot even perceive, we cannot even be conscious of, because they occur on spatial and temporal scales very distant from us. Finally, by producing these unpredictable and often non-visible effects, our actions generate alterations that may cause harm, which may have so-called negative externalities, regardless our good intentions. Because of this new way of conceptualizing the relation between knowledge and action, researchers had to face the fact that knowledge alone is not enough to guide their practice in order to reach the purposes they have in mind. And this was the result of a massive scientific revolution, but it was at the same time something quite obvious for disciplines like philosophy, for example, especially in the field of ethics and morals. Our theoretical knowledge cannot on its own guide a truly transformative action, especially if this action aims to deal with or even to enforce values of justice, equity, inclusion, etc. In this respect, for example, Aristotle identified a type of knowledge called phronesis in Greek, in ancient Greek, whose principles cannot be theorized outside practice, meaning before or beyond our action, but rather in the course of it.
Despite the challenges posed by this greater distance, let's say, you mentioned that it has also brought about some positive approaches. Specifically, you discuss how many academics have begun to explore the relationship between academia and civil society in a different manner. Could you elaborate more on this aspect of your discussion?
Yeah, what I'm referring to specifically is the action research paradigm, and particularly what some scholars call participatory action research approach. The participatory action research approach represents an epistemological paradigm through which researchers try to deal with a new scenario full of uncertainties. At the basis of action research are two fundamental ideas which are interdependent on each other and derive from the crisis of the linear relation between knowledge and action. The first idea is that knowing something is no longer an individual fact, but has a collective dimension. And the second idea is that knowing something is a form of action, and in two ways. On one hand, knowing a phenomenon, that is trying to understand it through theoretical models, in any case means modifying that phenomenon. And on the other hand, the best way to know our reality is to try to address it in practice. In other words, to transform it. In the field of planning theory and practice, this means that when it comes to deal with a special issue, like a development issue, an environmental issue, etc., the research process about that issue should involve, in the first place, those who are personally affected by the problem. And this doesn't mean, let me say it, using them as a data source, like interviewing them, observing them, etc. But rather, this means cooperating with them as actual co-researchers. In other words, sharing with them all the responsibilities of our research process, including choices, including control, risks, and benefits. At the same time, if the best way to know something is trying to transform it within the participatory action research approach, the research aim must be a very immediate and hence visible transformation to fix a little piece of the issue at stake, a concrete action that will generate a reflexive and iterative process among co-researchers. That is, define the problem, act, observe, reflect, and redesign the problem, redesign the action, observe, reflect, and keep going. Usually, this process happens in the context of what scholars call long-term research partnerships, where the word long-term emphasizes the fact that change, especially structural change, needs time, needs a trial and error approach, and needs endless critical self-evaluation.
Your discussion is centered around the specific experience, the COPET Community Planning and Ecological Design Summer School. Could you provide more information about this experience, highlighting its challenges and opportunities?
So COPET Summer School is basically the tool through which a group of researchers tries to understand and experience how action research can be at the same time practiced, taught, and learned. COPET is a 10-day summer school that allows participants to explore both the theoretical foundations of and the practical strategies of participatory action research. The school was established in 2012 and stems from a partnership among the University of Catania, Italy, the University of Memphis, and UMass Boston, USA. Every year, this partnership is extended to a fourth non-academic partner, which is normally a Sicilian civic organization, more or less formalized, asking to collaborate with researchers with the aim of shaping strategies to improve the quality of life of the place where they live, that could be characterized by marginality, distress, environmental problems, etc. Each year, COPET activities are organized in two phases: the preliminary phase, which takes about 10 months, and the actual summer school implementation running for 10 days. The preliminary phase is characterized by a close collaboration between the local organization and COPET instructors, and this has several goals to meet. The first goal is to identify the specific objective of the school, that is the issue that will be investigated. Normally, the objective is co-developed by both instructors and the local organization in a collective effort that allows to frame a proper research question. The second goal is the establishment of a mutual learning agreement, that is a document where COPET expected output is clearly identified. For example, at the end of the summer school, participants must present a preliminary document for a strategic plan, providing indications for dealing with the issue at stake. Moreover, the mutual learning agreements provide also specific indications of mutual expectation, mutual commitments, and advantages among researchers and the local organization. Once this document is defined, the preliminary phase is also characterized by the development of the school program that is co-developed, having in mind two general purposes. On one hand, to provide the future participants of the summer school opportunities to learn new skills and knowledge about the local context, about the general issue at stake, about action research in general, and on the other, to open the 10-day research process as much as possible by envisaging different levels of locals' engagement. For example, locals who are particularly committed can join the school full-time. Locals who have significant knowledge about the issue at stake and, or I don't know, the local context are asked to give lectures or share materials or be available for interviews. Moreover, in general, locals can attend the 3 public events organized during the summer school in order to collect and co-analyze data, to co-produce strategies, and to present the research results. In this respect, the ultimate goal of COPED is to identify concrete actions highly shared among people that can be realized in the short, in the medium, and in the long term to sort out the issue at stake with the support, the commitment, and the specific expertise of most of the people engaged in the research process. I think that COPED Summer School can represent a huge learning opportunity for those involved, and specifically a huge opportunity for participants, especially planning students and PhD candidates, to have at least a taste of participatory action research. At the same time, it can also be a frustrating experience because there are many students and young researchers who feel the need to produce knowledge that can be really helpful and have a transformative impact by a participatory action research approach. But the time frame of a PhD, for example, is often too short to establish from the very ground a long-term research partnership. So they taste something that cannot be implemented for their own research. Nevertheless, I think that COPED can help improve students' epistemological awareness and let them acquire so-called soft skills, speak in public, facilitate group, mediating conflicts, acquire engagement tools and methods that can be very, very helpful.
Urbinary.
Let's tackle a crucial challenge: bridging the gap between academia and the broader community. How can we foster meaningful connections and collaboration to translate academic insights into real-world impact?
I really think that participatory action research is one of the most effective way to foster collaboration and translate insights into real-world impact. However, we have to admit that building a long-term action research partnerships between academics and civil society groups requires time and from many points of view. It is a process that involves building trust, defining a common vocabulary, setting common values, and it is a recursive process because the context conditions are always changing. Moreover, as academics, it is a process where we don't have unilateral control over its timing and effectiveness. Of course, no research project of any kind ever goes completely as planned, but action research increases the difficulty of managing a project to produce timely results. Unfortunately, this stands against the way research is funded nowadays, especially when public resources are limited and competitive grants are the only way to get money. Moreover, from the civic organization's point of view, long-term partnerships require many organizational skills and resources. However, in contexts like Sicily, for example, civic organizations are highly fragmented, highly disempowered, due to factors such as the small number of members and the lack of methods and tools to promote widespread engagement among civil society. And this situation weakens, of course, their ability to be representative, to advance collective demands, and to impact the institutional dimension, and to be involved in long-term partnerships. At the same time, the situation challenges us, planning researchers, especially action researchers, by raising questions about what our role should be as researchers. In this respect, my research group is working on whether and how planning researchers should not only support civic organizations in achieving spatial improvement, but rather actively promote and trigger self-organizing practices within civil society, even by acquiring expertise from different disciplinary fields such as organizational studies, community organizing, leadership studies, social movement studies, etc. Over the past 2 years, for example, COPED has worked with local organizations not only to address specific planning issues, but also, in some cases, mainly to strengthen their organizational capacity and to enhance their ability to network and mobilize the local civil society. So it's a difficult and long process. We can say that conditions in universities and in the world out there are not ideal for learning and conducting participatory action research. But as a former COPED student once said, during each community meeting, trying to figure out how to deal with a problem with people, I keep feeling that I'm doing one of the most beautiful things in the world. And this is not something that simply has to do with my personal beliefs, but also with the quality of the research I experience to produce.
Thank you for being with us, Giulia.
Thank you.
Urbinary.
And for our listeners, stay tuned for our next episode in which we will revisit the keynote speeches and roundtable discussions from track 4 of the conference titled Planning Tools and Techniques, Bridging the Gap Between Theory and Practice. Join us for an interactive recap as we delve into and comment on the topics they covered. Urbinary is produced in collaboration with Poliradio, the official radio channel at Politecnico di Milano.
Urbinary, the podcast cataloging the everyday and extraordinary in the city.